determination, is how much he wants to win, and yeah, still beating himself up. He has to forget because the game's starting now.
And I think for anyone thinking that he's not motivated to win this one because he's already through to Toronto, what we just saw on the screen, it just shows how much this means to him.
And here we go. The final rapid game in the AI Cup. MVL, draw or win, he wins the AI Cup. Magnus has to win to take it to Armageddon. Take us through it.
Good news for Magnus Carlsen and for all the fans at home. It's an open Sicilian. That means it's going to be exciting, guaranteed no matter what. Very few forced drawing lines in this one. A lot of pieces going to remain on the board for a long time. The pawn structure is going to be different. Magnus here playing the Khan variation, I believe, pushing his pawn forward to a6, not deciding yet where to bring the black knights out to. And Maxime Vachier Lagrave, I'm surprised he went for this opening, I've got to admit.
Probably a Rossolimo keeping things more close. The close Sicilian was something that we'd be expecting. But Maxime, he's been showing that he wants to play objectively where he feels is his best chance. And he goes for an open Sicilian, which will give Magnus his chances. But looking at Magnus's camera, it feels like he's not only battling the board, but also his own mind right now.
Yeah, and Maxime needs to try and strike while Magnus is still composing himself, while he's still a bit distracted with the earlier games, the earlier play. Now, black is going for a hedgehog formation, something I know you love, Tanya. White here has what we call the Maroczy bind. White has pawns on the e4 squares, c4 squares, trying to clamp down, preventing any pawn breaks. But black is rock solid. Black is really, really flexible. And I know Magnus quite likes these positions as well.
We've seen him play these positions in the Champions Chess, though, with some great results. And again, it's all about flexibility of plans for black here. So you keep white kind of guessing of where you're really headed. The first question is, where does Magnus develop the bishop from f8? Bishop to e7 is the normal course where you place it in front of the king. The d pawn moves one step forward. Then you decide where you want to develop your queenside knight. And Magnus makes the first, well, it's not the most popular approach in this position. The slightly less played bishop to d6, it lines up with the queen with a direct threat against the h-pawn. And the reason that this move isn't played as often is because you want to push that d-pawn to the square that the bishop has just taken to complete your development of the queenside pieces.
Yeah, it feels like Magnus is trying to surprise Maxime, take him out of any potential preparation here. As you say, not playing the most common first move, but there is a threat to take white's pawn on h2 with a check, and Maxime has to react. He's giving him decisions. Again, that's something you need to do when you want to win. You keep pieces on the board, you give your opponent 3 or 4 choices every move, and something you've said throughout this this tournament, Tanya, every kind of game is decided by incremental mistakes, and you just have to hope that giving your opponent decision after decision after decision will slowly turn things in your favor.
And that's the thing that works for Magnus really well, because he's the player who can make maximum number of accurate best moves, move after move. And very often for his opponent, they just collapse after some point. And in this one, Magnus again doing that approach where he gives decisions, provoking Maxime to push pawns on the king side, which later on can become some sort of a target for black. He does use the pin. The bishop goes to the c5 square to pin up the knight. Maxime continuing with development to stop that. A lot of forcing moves being played here by both players.
A lot of forcing moves, and the big question is who it really favours. It feels like Magnus has lost a bit of time. Magnus's dark square bishop has moved twice, and it will get traded off, so it might even move for a third time in the next few turns. And Maxime, meanwhile, has gained a lot of space with the white pawns. Talk about central control like we have been doing. White has beautiful control over the centre here. Still roughly in the balance, but I think I would take white here, Tanya. And for Magnus Carlsen, that's not a great sign. He's still very cramped, lacking pawn breaks, lacking any potential attackers against the white king.
Yes, and he needs to decide where to place his own king as well. You want to go towards the king side, castle towards the king side, but that could also mean certain attacks that you have to watch out for once the white queen lands on the king side. There are 2 parts to do this in these kind of positions. The white queen can go from f3 and then go over to the other side of the board. Maxime chooses the other one. He starts with queen to d2 instead. David connecting the 2 rooks. It just feels like white's managed to get the harmony within the pieces. And that d6 pawn, the d line that you're highlighting right now, is a long-term point of contention.
Wow. Yeah, I was expecting the white rook to land there. He uses another square, hinting that he might want to propel some pawns forward later on. Maxime's rooks look really nice here, supporting these far advanced pawns. And watch out for a pawn storm in the center as black what does black even do? You're the queen of the hedgehog. Hedgehog pawn formation. I'm not saying that randomly.
That's a lot of pressure right now to predict Magnus's and Maxime's next move, but I'm going to try. Now, usually what black really wants is to force white to take on c5 because that helps you with your structure. And the first move that I would be thinking about here is actually making that happen with the knight from f6 jumping onto g4. I'm glad to see the eval bar not react to that. My idea is that if you take on c5, there are two very tempting ways to capture it, but I think I would want to take it with the b pawn. And the reason for that is that I want to stop your e pawn moving up the board to e5, control that. I've improved my center, improved my chances of an attack along the b line, and I would be the one who's happier with this trade than white. So knight g4 would be on my radar in this position.
Yeah, I love it, Tanya. Just always looking out for pawn structure.
He goes for it, David.
You called it. That is the stamp of approval from the world number one.
The biggest stamp of approval.
And this position on the board. OK, he takes with the d pawn. I'm surprised as well, especially in positions where you need to win. Kind of imbalancing the pawn structure here, kind of having the central pawn mass for black looks really nice and healthy. Instead, it's a slightly more symmetrical pawn structure, but he's banking maybe on the open file. It looks very tempting for white to step forward in the center, kind of creating nice squares, nice inroads into the black camp. But black's rooks will centralize, and at least some open file, some activity for Magnus. I think he would love as well just to occupy this square later on with a piece. The question is, what happens if white kicks you back? I'm not even going to answer that because I'm going to pass that question to Magnus. I'm not sure whether the knight goes back in this direction or even maybe this direction, just because I'm scared of getting kicked around the board. But yeah, that's the question for him right now. He's created some imbalance, and that's step one in a must-win situation.
Yeah, that's the problem. I get one move right, but not the second one. But Magnus here, I think he's doing what needs to be done to create his chances. He's opened up the D line, as you're pointing out, and it looks like black's rook and queen will be the one that's closer to getting to that open file. Very good point there made by you, that after white does kick out that knight from g4, you probably do want to get it to the edge of the board. It's not the general advice in chess, but here it's all about making sure that you don't lose out on tempos, and allowing white to push those central pawns with tempo would be very dangerous. That would just be asking for trouble, because once e5 happens, the white knight from c3 also lands on e4. It's not only an attacking move towards the king side, David, but it gives a really strong hold on that d6 square.
Yeah, this is a big hole in the black position, this square, because you have no dark square bishop, you have no pawns that can control it, so it's an outpost for white's knights. Black needs to fight against this maneuver. So that's what I'm expecting from Vachier Lagrave. I'm surprised he's pausing either pawn to e5 or first a kickback on the knight. One of those two moves would be the most logical, and black would have to react. But Magnus Carlsen, do you think he's got it out of his system yet?
No, no. I've been looking at his camera. He looks frustrated. He looks not too happy with himself. I don't think it's out of his system.
Yeah, that's...
And I'm not an expert, but I'm just looking at him.
I think on the plus side for Magnus is maybe he's so angry right now that he's playing quickly. The adrenaline's pumping. He's really kind of forced himself to wake up, speed up.
Yeah. And also for Maxime, he is so close now to just a huge tournament victory for him in his career at this point in his life. How hard is it to just sit there and like focus on the next move, next move, next move, and not be like, ooh, if I win this, I'm going to post this on Instagram. And I'm gonna, you know.
That's what I think about when I'm playing tournaments.
But you're absolutely right. I don't think that even Maxime thought about getting this far when the tournament started. It's his one shot to make it. He has to go all the way through and then most probably beat Magnus Carlsen, who will make it through to the finals. These are thoughts that probably didn't even cross his mind. And here he is. He's done it in the grand final and looking close to do it in the grand final reset. It's a sign of a champion that he doesn't let it get to his head right now. Yeah. And he's focusing on the moves. And so far, Kaya, he's making all the right ones on the board. So I think he's not thinking about the Instagram.
Not yet.
Are you guys thinking about it? What will you post after this?
I'll post something with you guys. The ladies in red. The ladies in red.
Yes.
Full disclosure, David was playing that song in the studio before we went live.
It was very nice, yeah. We've had a really nice Friday. Pizza party, popcorn, and first of all, amazing chess.
Incredible chess. I mean, it takes two to tango. This has been an incredible match throughout the week. When they first played a couple of days ago and today, both have contributed equally.
I think for Magnus, the frustration is not only about what happened in the last game, but what's been happening throughout the day. In match 1 as well, it was the most non-Magnus chess that I have seen in each of the games, even in the ones where he had the advantage and the ones where he got into trouble. Usually with, I think, was it Alexander Alekine who said, for whom it was said you have to beat him in the opening, in the middle game and the end game?
I mean, it's true of any top player these days.
It's true, but I feel like for Magnus, you have to beat him in all these 3 on every single move. But today, Magnus has been off form from the very start. And even when he wins matches, he's so critical of his shape. He's so, he always talks about the quality of his play over the scoreline that the day ended with. And I think there's a lot of frustration with the chess that he played today, starting from round 1.
Yeah, starting from game 1 when Magnus could have actually forced a draw, instead losing in an endgame, really unlike him. And from then, things have spiraled. That being said, the more I look at this position, the more Maxime Vachier Lagrave was thinking, the more optimistic I would be feeling as black, because white had no obvious moves there. The last thing you can allow is black's knight on the edge of the board coming back into the center. And Maxime Vachier Lagrave now, he's ready to take that knight if it ever lands on the f5 square. He's putting his rooks back in the center, kind of recorrecting their position. Sometimes you have to admit you've put a piece on the wrong square and you have to improve it, take the time out to do so. And I like his last move, but it cost him a bit of time, cost him about 2-3 minutes. And yeah, as Magnus, I would be a bit more optimistic now. At least he's not going to get checkmated. I don't think white has the ammunition for that. Yeah. The space issue here isn't so drastic for black.
And it's a lot to do with that d4 square as well, which doesn't really allow white's knight from c2 to jump into activity. So ideas like from knight to c2 to e3 to going over to the king side and getting rid of a key defender on the king side is not going to happen because black has this jump with the knight to d4. These kind of positions, David, I agree with you that black has got reasons to feel like the opening's gone his way right now. You've developed all your pieces. The knight from h6 is the only problem piece in the position for black. But the other good news is that white doesn't have, at least for me, the idea of g4, g5 is, it's a bit much because you really open up this a8, h1 diagonal, giving a long-term play to black's queen and bishop that can line up to deliver checkmate. But with no g4, g5, can you really take advantage of black's knight at the edge of the board?
Probably not. I mean, this knight will try and jump in later. It cannot now, just to show it will get eliminated. And it's not just the fact that it's traded off, ruining the black pawn structure. It's more that white carves out an outpost for his own knight, hitting the queen, maybe even picking up a pawn on the next move. So black can't jump in yet with the knight. But I'm wondering, Tanya, you mentioned one move. If the white knight jumps away, how does Maxime react? Okay, he's played it on the board. Knight takes knight. Magnus is going for it now. Wow. He's trying to change the pawn structure. He's got a passed pawn on d4, and he's also corrected the position of this knight, the poor knight on the edge. He's bringing it in. There's a threat of a knight fork hitting the 2 white rooks. Therefore, one of the rooks moves, shifts up. Maybe Maxime is going for checkmate after all. Maybe he's trying to shift the rook to go for this weak spot, the Achilles heel in black's position, the h7 square. But black does have a beautiful knight about to jump in. Suddenly, it's like a wave. It's kind of crashing against the rocks, but that's good for Magnus. It doesn't mean the position is dry anymore. It means there's life. And knight e3 on the radar.
Wow.
What do we think here?
The position has completely changed in the last few moves, and there's a big threat that white has. The one that you pointed out, just 2 moves, right? Rook h3, queen h5, and then you're threatening a deadly mate on h7. You never want to really make a move like h6 to defend that, David, because it will invite a lot of tactics eventually if the white knight jumps onto f6. And I think that's the reason why Magnus has decided to actually trade the bishop for the knight on e4, because now it's just so much easier to guard the king side. You'll always have the option to go g6 or h6 at the right moment to stop any attack on this diagonal, as you're pointing out. But for Magnus, it is all about the d pawn, giving him the e3 square and a long-term passer. Also play along the c line. The c4 pawn is a weakness that white needs to watch out for, which is what doesn't allow white to trade the light-squared bishop with the knight on f5.
That's right, and he's thinking right now, Vachier Lagrave, maybe he'll take with the bishop, but then the black knight will move. It won't allow itself to get traded, and suddenly, yeah, it is black with the better pieces suddenly, especially this knight. It's what did you call it yesterday? A kraken?
A kraken. That's Peter Swindler. That is a kraken right there.
Kraken, yeah. This is a monstrous knight with a lot of power. And Magnus, he's turning the screw. Now it's more strategic. It's a slower type of position. No chaos like the previous game, the previous 2 games even. And yeah, Magnus, this is where he really thrives. It's as if the anger somehow is driving him and it's calmed him down. He's going back to basics. This is Magnus as he kind of, just as he cruises. Just simple strategic position.
Yeah, it's like that beast, right? A wounded beast is even more dangerous because...
a wounded kraken.
Yeah, this one would be a big, big kraken, a mythical creature, which is extraordinary power if that knight does get to the E3 square. But for Magnus, Kaya, we were talking about, you know, what's his mindset. He's feeling the frustration, and we saw all those emotions right at the start of the game. But it really feels like he has used that to actually fuel himself for this game. And he's the one who is in driver's seat right now with the black pieces, creating all these chances. And this is, I think, one of the qualities out of the many that separates him from the rest.
Yeah. Both of them have really high ceilings. I think out of the players just below Magnus Carlsen, Vachier Lagrave is one of those who has this ceiling. When he's on form, I mean, he can play like this, but sometimes less consistent. And it's nice to see him being, just putting things together, just being in the zone constantly. This game, however, the clock times, it's normally Magnus who's been lower throughout the day. For the first time, really, he's been kind of upping the pace, upping the speed. And it's Vachier Lagrave who's, maybe it's the nerves, maybe it's the kind of momentous occasion getting to him.
I was just going to say that. Do you think that's the reason this whole mat situation is getting to him right now?
What? He's sacrificed a bishop. He's going for checkmate.
Checkmate, but it doesn't work.
But why has he sacrificed this? The black king has an escape square, and Magnus immediately blunders back, apparently. Is there a forced draw? Because white is a piece down.
He's threatening rook to f6, David?
Yeah, he's threatening to give a nasty check with the white rook. Suddenly, this game has sprung to life, out of nowhere, out of the blue. And maybe Vachier Lagrave is, well, according to the bar at least, holding with this counterattack.
While Magnus thinks in this position, can we just do a quick action replay of the last 3 moves? Because beep hit the fan.
Yeah, something went down here. It was all about a sacrifice before it's too late. This rook was attacked. Nice way of putting that, Tanya. He gave up this bishop, and it shouldn't work. After a check, actually, it was in this position. Magnus, with 9 minutes on the clock, could have sealed the win if he just pushed his pawn forward 1 square rather than 2. The difference being that in this position, white does not have the time to bring his rook up the board, because now black, I was going to say, can take this pawn, but no, that isn't the computer move. Apparently, this is very different after the black knight takes this rook. I think we'll see something very similar in the game. Let's try and investigate the difference. In the current game position, black's knight can actually take another piece, but suddenly the white queen dropped back with a check. And look, there's nowhere to go. It's a draw. King to e7, and it's checkmate. If black goes back, it's a draw, and that's enough for Vachier Lagrave. A repetition of the position. This is the threat. Queen to g6. This would force a draw, and Maxime would win the tournament. How does he defend against this, Magnus Carlsen? This is why, actually, he needed the pawn back on f6. That is incredible.
That's incredible, and this is what chess makes chess so hard, right? You've got these 2 pawn moves to fight against the mate, and that is the difference between a win and a draw. And in this case, it's the difference between a championship right now.
Wow.
f6 would have won Magnus the game, but the one that he chose, the decision that he made, it looks like his best option would now just be to take the rook and go into a repetition.
Yeah, just to show this again, it's literally a coin toss. It's heads or tails. You have to move this pawn 1 square or 2 to stop your king getting checkmated. You need to give it some breathing space. Magnus immediately pushed his pawn forward to f5, but the detail would have been here, just to show it once again. Now knight takes rook is possible, because after the white queen drops back with a check, it's no longer possible to play queen takes e6 checkmate. There's a pawn in the way on f6. And now, for example, after queen takes pawn, black could block with his rook, and black would have an extra rook, extra knight, and win the game. Now Magnus facing this devastating tournament-ending threat of queen to g6, and there's nothing to do.
There's nothing to do, because queen g6 is a massive threatening checkmate or a repetition there. And you said it's a coin toss between 2 moves, but at this level, it's got to be just calculation, right? Had Magnus just slowed down, he would have definitely seen this.
Magnus, in this position, he played f5 instantly, did not even pause. And yeah, with... something's up today, but with more time on his clock, with 9 minutes, he should have been able to find pawn to f6. It's not obvious. We do have the evaluation bar here, so we did see it swing immediately. We saw the truth, but Magnus, he could have calculated it, as you say, Tanya. And now suddenly, I think he was just looking at this threat, but maybe forgetting with the tournament situation, a draw is enough for white. Queen to g6, devastating.
And is it too late now, David? Is there any way for black to actually keep the game going?
I don't see it. It's really, really risky to keep the game going. The problem is you can't really run with the king either. If you try starting to run with your king after a check, well, maybe this is the best bet. But I was going to say a check here, and look how this white rook plays a part. Suddenly, if the king continues its journey, then rook takes pawn, and the black king in huge trouble. Yes, you've got an extra knight, but white has 3 pawns, maybe 4 pawns soon, and an ongoing attack. Maybe this is the best bet.
I think this is going to happen. Magnus has slowed down. He's calculating a way to not end the game immediately, and it feels like the king run is the only way, even if it means an objectively worse endgame. You're up a piece for 4 pawns. You still fight it out. There's still chances there.
Still some chances. The one thing he cannot do, let's repeat it, knight takes rook. Being greedy would not work out. Queen check would force a repetition of moves. And let's go back to Magnus Carlsen.
4 minutes now.
It's the kind of position, Kaya, you could have 30 minutes on the clock and it doesn't matter because you have to make a decision that you're not going to be happy with.
Is it a blunder?
Magnus Carlsen has blundered. Queen takes c4. But why is this a blunder? We have to work it out. White's going to give a check. Look at Maxime frowning as well. He's like, are you sure?
The king
a check.
has to go back to e8. You can't go to e7 because of queen g7. Is this game over?
Black is getting checkmated. Look at Magnus Carlsen.
He knows it.
Even a rook trade will not save black here. Rook takes rook is met by the white pawn in the center recapturing, and black has no checks. Black has no counterplay. It's going to be checkmate. Maxime's going to win the AI Cup.
Oh, my God. Do you think Magnus is going to play this out, or will he just resign? Look at that.
Oh. He's distraught, Magnus Carlsen.
Massive frustration. He is about to lose the grand final, Magnus Carlsen.
And look at Maxime. He knows he's done it, Kaya.
Yeah, that is tension leaving Maxime's body right now. He can relax because he's done the hard work. Checkmate is guaranteed. There's nothing to do. Black cannot defend this position.
Will we see Magnus hit the resign button?
I think so.
We might see a checkmate on the board.
There's literally no way to fight. White is threatening to play rook takes rook. A trade of rooks would allow the white e-pawn to join the battle and maybe even become a new queen.
Yeah, and MVL is starting to let the emotions come to him. He is starting to realize he is the winner. Maxime Vachier Lagrave, the Frenchman. He wins the AI Cup. He banks the ticket to Toronto. He is going to the tour finals. He does the impossible. He beats Magnus Carlsen in 2 matches on fire. What an incredible performance.